Hi friends, today I am going to show you an important white paper which is related to firewall and cloud. Before that, I'm just taking the session from outside, summer. So if you have some issues with noise, sorry, but I'm not going to do it regularly. So the firewall service in AWS is WAF, which is called as Web Application Firewall. As it says, we need firewall to block the connections. Like for example, you have an application or web page, it reaches from your browser using a port numbers like 8080 or 443, http and https. But we have different other ports, IP addresses from different regions. We connect, our IP address are not same and our port numbers are not same. So this paper tells us how we can implement AWS WAF, which is Web Application Firewall, and its guidelines. Okay, so this paper, before we move into the paper, let's see the content. You can see the major web attacks. What are the major attacks if you are not going to implement a firewall? Firewall is not new to us. We had it in on-premises infrastructure as well. Like we had many different firewall like Netscaler, FortiGate. So there are big brand and big companies. They are having this firewall. But let's focus on AWS WAF. And they say first you need to understand your threats and mitigations. DDoS attack. So DDoS attack is something which happen in the network level. So that's why they may know like DDoS attack at layer 7, which means what are the attacks can be happen your application layer on your not on your infrastructure network, because we have different OSA layers, layer 1, layer 2, layer 3, layer 4, right, from data layer, presentation layer, network layer. So layer 7 obviously is your top layer, your presentation layer, where your application actually talks. And web application attacks, we need to see how we can have rules in WAF, how we can manage those rules, and how we can make our custom rules, because when we build application we might use different ports, port numbers, so we need a customized rules. And there are some marketplace rules, bad bots, no, like chatbots, like we ask something and it will reply. So what bad bot, custom request and response. So request and response is the key here. So what is requested, if something comes to a web page or application, it's called the request, and our web page or our application sends a response. So you should not send a response if you are blocking it. Then requirements, protection, obviously we need firewall for protecting our application. And also governance. For example, you do your application in specific region and you don't want to allow some region, right? Or someone is trying to access, someone needs to keep monitoring your application request. So who will monitor it? So we obviously have a monitoring system, but this specifically on security. So if you, for example, they have given three example: AWS firewall implementation with two WAF policies with one central policies. So how we can have central policy for all your AWS account. And finally on logging, this is the key where we get all the data. If we want to audit who connects it, what connects it, how many requests comes, which port number we are accessing, that's a requirement. Then when we come to actual implementation, so we need to have a starting point. Let's see what the starting point is. You should have an integration design, architecture design, how you want to configure your WAF. Validation in staging environments, deployment in staging. Staging is nothing but your first environment, or before you go to production. You need to test somewhere with the validation, what ports or everything, so you will be more secure. So once you validate it, okay, this environment my application is running, you need to have WAF in that environment to make some policies before we do it in production. Monitoring and visibility, this is very important because we are going to monitor with both, and how AWS both control dashboard gives you, because this is something which comes with AWS itself. Then monitoring using Amazon CloudWatch. So if you see this Amazon board control dashboards or Amazon CloudWatch is integrated because this they are also on AWS services. So that is what when we are deploying something into AWS, it's very easy to use another service which is of AWS, so they will have integration with all other services. Finally, testing and tuning is really needed because always when you try something you will get many alerts or many issues. That is usually it is false negatives because we need to tune our alarms. False positives, yes, it is positive, but actually it is not impacting you. That rule is not needed. That rule is correct, but it's not impacting you. And resolving the false positive is very important because false negatives we will anyway remove it from our rules, but false positive we need to try to resolve it and see if it is really needed, the policy is. Then finally we need to deploy to production. Now we do all the testing, assign the policy. Once we deploy it to production, then operation comes to the picture. It is ready for operation team to have this monitoring. So that is very important to check, like all logging is working. Then we need to check, we need to actually installing it or deploying it. Then we are following up the post deployment. Then we should also consider the cost because we are if we are implementing many WAF, what is the cost consideration we have to do. And finally conclusion. I think this looks very good. Let's see the guidelines from the start. As I always mention, I have read this white paper before, and I am going to take you to the very important and key things, not boring you with everything. But I will give this link in the description for you guys to look into this white paper. So first of all, what is WAF? It's a web application firewall that helps you to protect your websites and web application against various attack vectors of application layers. Like OSA application layer is nothing but layer 7. This white paper outlines recommendations for implementing AWS WAF to protect existing and new web applications. This white paper applies to everyone who is actually want to protect your applications, which might be web application like public facing applications. So as AWS always mentioned in our previous white paper also, security is a shared responsibility between us and AWS. AWS is offering lot of services for web applications like CloudFront, API Gateway, and application load balancer, AppSync. But protecting all these public-facing services, we have to take care. And what is needed, you need to filter it out. Like you should filter the traffic for your public-facing application. And there is a standard called OWAF 10. Okay, OWAF is Open Web Application protocol, like security protocol. This is kind of an OWAF itself a separate topic, but this is a standard which we need to maintain. And AWS built this WAF based on the uh, OWAF framework or OWAF guidelines. So that's pretty good. If you see that, sorry, I have dragged it, but it's fine. I will go back. So AWS WAF is managed web application firewall. It is completely managed by AWS. We no need to configure anything. Like we no need to install anything, but of course we need to configure like other AWS services like S3 or EC2. Sorry, EC not EC2, like VPC or things, right? And let's see the WAF framework, like the diagram. If you see the web application firewall sits on top of CloudFront because people use CloudFront for content delivery management for the application. Some may expose their application from load balancer. They give the load balancer IP or URL. Some may use API gateway to expose. Some may use AppSync. So if you are using any of these services, then in front of these services, you need to deploy AWS WAF. So WAF is native services no of AWS. So it has integration between all these services. What we have to do is we need to just install WAF. And why we need to install WAF, basically that is what they are given here. So they say it's flexible to implement protection, manage rules, partner provided rules, custom rules. So you can manage your security rules with a web application firewall. Understanding the threats and mitigation requirement of AWS WAF, implementing AWS WAF, deploying AWS WAF to production, cost containment. This is the key which we discussed before in this content as well. Let's go to the understanding of threats. The first one is DDoS attack. Someone in your trying to access your website. For example, I make a script and try to hit your website like continuously, and I take rest, and it get request lot of request thousand. It makes your website slow. The performance of your website will go down because someone is written the load script or something, right? So for example, I have a rule. If I see the load request for multiple times, block that IP or block that uh, traffic where it comes from. Then after 100 requests, this rule thinks, okay, this is something someone is trying to spam, so it blocks it. So that is where this web application attacks, DDoS denial of service is like, you might in your configuration, if something is wrong, like something you have missed out, then that will become a door for attackers. And when you say web, this attack can be happen from application. If they take the application, they can take control of your database and take the data, like they say, right, your Aadhaar card database is hacked or something. They are coming in the news, right? Basically they attack the application, but application eventually connected with your database, and database has all the sensitive data of our customers or the application, right? The third is the bots is nothing but what I explained now. Like I may explain a script, but with the technology, the bot is nothing but which can be sending your traffic again and again and again and again. So that's how to no block that bot or block that traffic. So AWS WAF helps to improve the security for these three things. One is the layer 7 DDoS attack. Layer 7 is HTTP and HTTPS flooding. Flood is nothing but, yeah, you know the meaning of flooding, like lot of requests. Web attacks. So CVE is vulnerability attacks. Like if you recently heard about Spring Boot package problem, or if you log for J, so there's a lot of vulnerabilities, right? Bad boards I explained you guys. So now if you want to read detail about DDoS, this paper gives you the knowledge about DDoS, but I already explained you in the short. And if you want to learn about uh, web attacks, what kind of web attacks can be happen, and it basically ACL access control list, a lot of things, and the custom rules. Okay, market. Okay, now I think I skipped this part. So if you see eight rules, this is very important. WAF rule statements. What is rules? This is the rule which will be strictly followed by our application, and this rule will have a single top level statement, like single top level rule, and then there will be multiple sub level rules. And all these tool have three things: and, or, not. And statement, or statement, not statement. This IP and this IP can talk. This IP or this IP can talk. This IP cannot talk. Okay, so these statements will be there while we writing the rules. The first rule is base rule groups. So the base rule groups is common for all the applications, which is the OAF, as I mentioned, Open Web Application Security Protocol, which they give this standards. Use case based rules. So your application or your database, your application, you might be running in 633 or 733, which is very specific to your use case. The third is IP reputation rule groups. This IP based blocking happens like you can give IP range or IP based. That is the third one. Well, mostly we can block by a port because that is more standard. Because if you block except 443, if you block all the ports, that's well and good. But still, if we want to also play with IPs, that is the third option in these rules. And we also have this called access control this, which is specific to your application, who can access, who cannot access. But by default, this will be automatically there. We need to change when we need to change the group. As I mentioned, based on the WAF, they already have some rules when you deploy this service into your application. And you can also set notification using SNS topic, simple notification service, so that when something happens, it can notify you. And eventually monitoring with CloudWatch as well. Then custom rules. Custom rules is nothing but you can make a specific rule for your application to block the HTTP patterns, headers, so UI body, IP. So there is lot of parameters. If you see how the web page is requesting, if you go to the developer tool in your browser, you will see a lot of things here, right? So there is a header. Basically this is our HTML code, like HTTP protocol which uses to connect. But there is a network, where it comes from, what is the source. So if you want to have granular level of if you see this ID in this, where this ID comes from, right? So actually I am trying to see some of the data from the HTML file in this web page. So people, be event listeners, people can see lot of data which and we want to customize it, what you want to show or what you don't want to show based on the IP address. Then we can make this custom rules. So that's very good. And marketplace rule is already created by someone. For example, I have an application and I don't know what is the rules I have to write. So I can go to marketplace and take, already someone have tried it and implemented and they give this rules are good for having your application. Then I can just take that rule and apply to my application. That is also very good because they would have tested most of the things. Even we miss something, they would have tried to update it. Bad boards, this is the easiest way of making some web page performance low or affecting very easily, because it also affects the cost. How? We have auto scaling. So when your request is getting more, you will your serverless application or your EC2 application, where if you have auto scaling, you try to scale your application, right? And these all requests which are coming to your application is not true. It's a fake. And it still, because of auto scaling, the instance grows and eventually you get an bill, right? So that's the problem with this bad boards. But let's see. So as I mentioned, we no need to take more time on it. So let's go and check the implementation. So if you see the implementation, this is very important. Like we have app 1, app 2, app 3, app 4, app 5, and this is different app, and 6 policies. You have your ACL web access control list 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so this is your WAF part. Your WAF will have your endpoints, your backends or load balancers, web app. Okay, so I like to make a part 2 of this video. Just I will pass it here. Just we continue this in my part 2, because we need to talk more about this. This is very important for security, and I think the noise is very high here. Yeah, thank you.